Have you ever felt frustrated by a colleague who just works differently? I once had a colleague who was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and suddenly it all made sense for her how she could focus for hours on a complicated project but put off a simple email for weeks. And it really got me thinking about neurodiversity at work and how we should redesign work for different minds. Welcome back to the Work It podcast. My name is Nat. Gerald's not with me today, but here to help us explore how we can better understand and work with different thinking styles and abilities in the workplace is Hazlin. She is the founder of the Institute of Neurodiversity. Hazlin, welcome to the Work It podcast.
Thank you so much, Nat. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming down. I understand that you have been diagnosed with ADHD, yes?
That's correct.
Okay, so looking back at when this happened, when you were diagnosed, what parts of your work experience started to click for you after you understood how your brain worked differently?
I'm someone who's been diagnosed late in life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 54 years old. I was diagnosed.
Oh, you don't look it.
Oh, thank you so much. And I got diagnosed because my children got diagnosed.
Ah, so you were wondering if you were also neurodivergent.
Yes.
That's why you sought a proper diagnosis.
Yes, and also
Okay.
because I was struggling. I was
Right.
struggling reading research papers and focusing on what I was reading. I was about to give up, actually. The behavioral traits is what you see. What you don't see is the work that is being done within our central nervous system.
Right.
And it all begins on what's going on in the brain. So somebody who's got ADHD will have to work doubly hard to be able to focus. Sensory around us, like lighting and noise, would really distract the way we want to be able to think critically.
You know, you mentioned that you were having trouble focusing on your papers that you were researching and you were writing. Obviously, once you get diagnosed, it's not as if that just goes away.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
how did the diagnosis help you cope with your work?
So knowing is one thing, as you said, that's the awareness. And then comes the management. And who else do you know who's going through what you're going through? It's different about, I know that my children, 2 of them were already diagnosed at that point, and accessing people, having that community who will, make you feel that you're not alone. Because being a senior person and a woman going through menopause, the symptoms and the struggles is exacerbated. There are a lot of symptoms of menopause and ADHD that sort of overlaps.
Now you actually look at how neurodivergence impacts people in the workplace, right? So what are the biggest mismatches that you've seen between how work is designed typically and how neurodivergent people actually function? And I know we're talking about the spectrum,
Yes,
right? Not
yes.
all neurodivergent people think the same way.
Correct. It's really where workplaces need to be designed, not for standardization, as you mentioned, and predictability. Neurodivergent individuals often operate through bursts of focus, high energy, and creative problem solving, especially people with ADHD.
Right.
The opportunity lies in hiring for cognitive contribution. It's about measuring what someone notices, clarifies, as well as connects that others miss. Someone with ADHD, and from lived experience, is when there's a crisis, this is when we'll be the first to say, put me in charge.
Oh, okay.
Because of the creativity, because of that curiosity.
It's not so apparent what type of person or what type of worker someone is when they enter the workforce, right? So how do you build a team like that?
In terms of the process of hiring, those are the questionnaire and questions that needs to change. Designing of the role, co-designing it with people who are already within the system. And also if someone is already hired and they're already within the system, it's about having that flexibility to change the system.
Right.
So
Well,
that psychological safety is important.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I want to click on that, on the flexibility bit for
Yeah.
a bit, because I'm just imagining perhaps there's a person who might not be very good at meeting deadlines, right? Does it mean, are you suggesting that their roles shouldn't involve deadlines? Or, because that doesn't sound quite fair then for, everybody else.
Yeah. No, that's true. So yes, to answer your question, yes. If that person who is not able to meet deadlines and you see a repeated pattern, then it's not about forcing that person to fit in the system or punishing that person. Then it's a very clear, evident that role or the task that is given to that person is the wrong task. So we are talking about shifting from task to thinking.
I see.
And you will realize that if you offer that person an opportunity to suggest the role that they want and ask the right question, how can I help you work better? And then you opening up that dialogue, that conversation, as I mentioned, will give the opportunity for that person to say, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I need. Going back to neurodiversity, someone who's autistic is that deadline, very regimental, very clear structure, having that micro-planning capability. Someone with ADHD has that burst of energy and creativity, will be able to work under tremendous pressure. And the hyper-focus will produce quality results that someone who doesn't have that capability and skill that comes naturally to them will be able to produce.
If I was someone who's maybe neurodivergent, how do I then identify what jobs I would thrive in? Like what kind of roles would best suit my strengths and weaknesses?
I talk about creativity. Cybersecurity is another one.
Okay.
Engineering. Finance as well is also an industry that you will find there are neurodivergent communities. Entrepreneurship.
Okay.
The gig economy, you'll find that there's a lot of neurodivergent youth. Is because they want to be able to decide what is the right time for them to start work and to end work. And the travel is what gives them excitement. And the variability, the excitement is about the change. It's because the same old tends to be something that will drag us down. And when we lose interest, it's being seen as someone who is not productive and someone's not interested and it's not disciplined. So I mentioned creativity, talent, music, sports. Sports is an industry that is there's a growing awareness when they get diagnosed that they are neurodivergent.
A lot of our listeners who might not be neurodivergent may have neurodivergent colleagues that they are having some difficulty with working with or understanding, right? So just a few scenarios that I'm going to run by. I want to get your advice on how to deal with these situations, right? Let's say I'm struggling to work with a colleague whom I suspect might be neurodivergent, but I don't know for sure. I haven't heard about any diagnosis. They've never spoken about it themselves. How should I start the conversation with them?
The last thing you should do is say, I think you should get diagnosed.
For sure, yeah.
I do that though. I do that
Okay.
sometimes, but in jest, jokingly. But sometimes I'm not joking. So we're trying to move away from diagnosing and from sort of like labeling someone who's either neurodivergent or not. I go back to what we say, the description about neurodiversity. It refers to everyone. We all have a brain, and that's neuro.
Yeah.
We're all different. That's diverse. So it's about accepting that we all think and we all process what we're thinking and reading and understanding differently, and we all communicate differently. So it's about communication. And once you have that awareness or you suspect, maybe talk about what is your struggle. I'm struggling with this.
Okay.
Maybe you are struggling the same way.
So not so much put a label on it, more understand the challenge that is presenting itself and address that instead.
And also put yourself in that shoe. Empathy is about putting yourself in the shoe. And hopefully what I want to see is in 10 years' time, we are not talking about neurodivergence as exclusion, as that something that you need to be treated differently, and that you are lowering the standard for someone like me who's got ADHD, but it's actually uplifting the baseline that would benefit everybody.
But we're going to move on to the next scenario, okay? So my colleague says they are neurodivergent, but she isn't diagnosed. I feel like they just make it up to get slack at work. What should I do? Now, I haven't been in this situation myself, but I know of a lot of friends who have mentioned something like this. There's a lot of this signaling that people do on social media in the workplace. How should someone who is in contact with this type of people go about it in the workplace?
Someone who really has ADHD diagnosed would not take it for granted and work really hard unless there's valid reason that they're suffering from anxiety or really feeling that they are struggling. For example, waking up in the morning. So, and my children, they are neurodivergent, but they all showed different traits of struggles and strengths. Sometimes I feel that when my son calls me and say that, I missed work today, and he calls me from London, I said, you are really struggling? And he said, yes. And I have to listen to him and let him explain what he's struggling with. And it's about having that conversation again. For example, my son mentioned to me that, that one day work from home was taken away from them. But they're more productive working from home. That time out for reflection, 20 minutes break that they need after 20 minutes of focus time, you see them start to fidget. And you say, stop fidgeting. Can you please pay attention? Look at me. Give me your eye contact. Without that awareness, you will not know that that person is really struggling with making eye contact. Like I will need to just walk around to be able to focus again, because after 20 minutes, my brain goes into that firing. To call it, that my brain is fried.
Yeah.
It is actually firing of the brain. And 20 minutes has been proven that not just for someone with ADHD, everyone. Can you sit for 1 hour and focus and remember all the content that is actually being given to you? No. It's not just giving excuses or giving someone with ADHD that extra treatment. Make that not just provision, but also across the board for everyone.
Okay. Well, I got one more scenario here before we wrap this up, right? Let's say I have a colleague who is super competent and I want to learn from them, but they often operate alone and sometimes scare me by being suddenly blunt or rude. How can I break the ice?
Sometimes you just have to make that mistake and then apologize later on. By saying, I'm sorry, but I may be really ignorant. I tried to find out, but perhaps you can, shed some light. So by just asking that question and being an active listening and putting yourself in their shoes, as you said, put yourself in the shoe. And there are people who actually are on medication and might have missed that medication for that day. You don't go and say, did you take your medication or not today? That's actually,
Yeah, it might be a bit provocative.
It's very provocative.
Yeah.
And so it's about reframing what you're saying, putting yourself in the situation, and by saying, okay, there's a policy here that says that you can't assume. Sometimes in the pantry you have to have this casual conversation, but I think everyone's still struggling. I don't have a clear answer to that, but that friendship, that cohesion that I spoke about, if you really care for that person, you would reach out. You would say, I'm here for you, and wait till they're ready to be there to talk to you. And just sending a card or maybe putting a note, having that cup of coffee or saying, maybe that person is struggling, or inviting that, I need help. Would you like to support me in what I'm doing? Show that you are struggling. But you're neurodivergent or someone with autism or dyslexia who may suffer from, too much information, that overload of information. This is why we talk about micro-planning, having a clear workflow, giving that, why don't we take a break? Don't say that, do you want to take a break? Making it a collective need is actually a really good example. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it's not about diagnosing the individual. It's diagnosing the environment.
Right.
So don't diagnose the person, diagnose the school, the workplace.
Haslin, thank you so much for sharing all of this. I'm sure everybody listening or watching will have learned a lot about how to deal with, if they themselves have been diagnosed as neurodiverse in the workplace, or how to deal with some of their colleagues who might have gotten diagnosed or display some neurodiverse tendencies. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
I want to say thank you, and I apologize also in advance if I haven't answered your question directly, because people with ADHD are thinking in multi-channels, and we tend to get distracted with things that we're passionate about.
And no worries at all, because I can get carried away sometimes when I love something. So I entirely understand sometimes missing a question and then going for your own answer.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time, Haslin.
Thank you, Nat.
Hello and welcome to the Ask Work It segment of the podcast. If you have a question that you're dealing with in the workplace that you can't manage to get through, why not send it over to us and we'll try to help you with it. Today's question, Gerald, comes from Amanda. Now, Amanda is a new hire who recently found out that one of her interns has been harassed by someone from another department. This includes things like unwanted touching and repeated messaging. The intern has already told the person to stop, and for now, the behavior has stopped. For now. But now Amanda is wondering, if it happens again, what should she do? How does she respect her intern's wishes while still protecting her and others at work?
So just to be clear, right? Like, okay, the intern does not want to report this to HR.
It seems like, and I've been in a situation like Amanda's. I've had an intern who, unfortunately, had been harassed, and I didn't even hear about it from them themselves. I heard it from another friend who was in the company, and when I asked the intern what they wanted to do about it, they just said, "I don't want to stir up any trouble." And I feel like it's because interns usually are at the bottom of the totem pole of an organization. It's very hard for them to feel empowered to do anything. And they're only there for a few months. So why stir up an investigation that might last longer than your internship, that will follow you back to school?
So what happened after that?
I respected that intern's wishes. I still don't know whether it was the right thing to do. When I reached out to the manager of the harasser, I said, you should do something about your people. Her response was just to be like, but this person has retendered their resignation. We don't want to tarnish their reputation. We don't want to leave a black mark on their, I didn't agree with that.
Yeah.
So, but if my intern didn't want to pursue it, I thought I shouldn't be making it uncomfortable for them.
The very least, you did something about it. Like you brought it up, you raised up to the person's supervisor, right? Typically from a HR perspective, I give you the textbook perspective here is you have to report it to HR.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it has to follow the organization's harassment policies. Sometimes this will include like doing some fact finding, gathering some evidence, and the person would have to be, if found found to be doing inappropriate things, the person would have to be punished according to the company's guidelines. And if it's serious enough, it could become criminal.
But then what do you do if the intern insists and they're like, just let me leave this organization in peace?
Yeah.
I don't want to have to think about this anymore.
Yeah,
do
I
you
don't
force
know.
them into reporting this?
The right thing is to encourage them to know it's fully within their rights to be able to speak up for themselves. Whether they want to pursue, how far they want to push this, it's also up to them. So, for example, they could speak to the HR and just make a report. But if, let's say, the intern really feels like it's not a big deal, right, at least it gets placed into the HR file, all right? And then the HR will have to go through their procedures to decide what happens, right? And we have to remember that this is also done so that you can protect other people in future from being subjected to such behaviors. Yeah. So definitely having to educate, the younger ones and the interns about their right to speak up about such things. It has to be done, right? But sometimes what I've seen is in companies, they have such policies, but they don't do anything about it. Yeah, and because everybody is like, they're numb to such things. It's so rampant. Have you seen a company like that before?
I mean, yeah, I'm not happy to say that I've been in places where that is the case, and very often in such environments, that just makes you feel even less empowered to take action, because you see it happening, right? And then you see other victims going through this, and you see them trying to go through the system, and reporting to HR, reporting to their manager, getting a neutral party to step in and do the investigation and whatnot. And all it results in is a 6-month investigation that goes nowhere. The person is reinstated to their position, and then you just have to work with the person that you reported who was harassing you. So sometimes it feels scary to report this to the relevant authorities.
And you're right about the investigation sometimes taking too long,
Yeah.
right? And if it takes too long, people just get tired of reporting and they just take it as a norm. After a while, good people will leave. If today I'm speaking to HR people, right, if they're developing such policies, I think they really have to bear in mind the length or duration and how much duress they are placing, the person who's reporting under.
Going back to Amanda, she's not so much the victim here as she is a witness, right? Because she's found out about this. So how does she move forward here while making sure that she's doing all the right things, but also making sure that her intern is not being put in uncomfortable positions?
I think Amanda is new to the team. I think it's important to just check in with HR on what the policy is about. And also sound out maybe from HR typically what happens, right? And just so that she gets an idea, and then she can go back to her intern to share the process, right? That will give her and the intern a lot more confidence at what might happen if they choose to report this. She probably has to also apply some sense of how serious this is. I guess certain things, if the intern doesn't feel very comfortable, then maybe it will be harder for Amanda to report it.
Right.
But Amanda, in my opinion, Amanda should still file a comment or a case or an incident with the HR that something like that took place. Right?
Just so that it's on file.
So that it's on file. Because you don't know, under the HR records, maybe several people have already filed these things against this person.
Right.
And it's not the first time.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's still important to at least put it on record. But whether this person the intern wants to push forward or not, it really depends on the intern.
Let's say the intern agrees, after some convincing by Amanda. Are there ways in which Amanda can help the intern through this process?
So I checked in with a few of my HR friends as well for some ideas about this before. And some of the good practices would be like, for example, having a sit-down interview, not just between HR and the intern, right? But maybe Amanda can be present just to show, some support for her.
Do HRs typically allow that?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Yeah, because you are the one who is the direct reporting line of the intern. I think it's good, just in case the intern feels like overwhelmed, allowing HR to go through the due diligence of asking the questions. They may ask for some evidence. If there were people, other witnesses around, they might want to know who are they, when the details of the event, right? So letting HR to keep everything. And then after that, they would do their due diligence to go and flag out to whatever committees that they have. Maybe reach out to usually such matters could be reported to the chief HR officer, so that they are also kept aware of such things. And then they will have to review internally what they might want to do about it. Some of these cases, people might want to be anonymous, but honestly speaking, I don't know how anonymous can you be. Because you have to be pretty specific about who is the person, who's the victim here, right? So you can't really keep your identity anonymous.
Yeah. Well, this just feels like a tough situation all around.
Yeah, but sometimes it's the right thing to do, lah.
Are there any other ways that Amanda could support this intern in, throughout the investigation or throughout the reporting process? I'm imagining things like, suggesting going for counseling or stuff like that. Is that something that, would Amanda be overstepping if she were to do this kind of thing?
If you start to spot, some difficulties, like for example, if the person gets anxiety whenever the other party is in the meeting room, right? Then maybe this could be carried along with the intern for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's really, really important to seek help. If once you spot such signals, and again, we don't know how serious this is. But then again, the gravity of the matter really doesn't just depend on the offense, but also depends on how the victim feels about it, how they feel that they have been treated. You have to really monitor your intern a little bit more. check in with her to find out how is she doing, and really observe and not just take the words, her responses as the truth lah. So you got to observe her behavior. If the person is really working in close proximity, maybe change the seats. Don't let them see each other that much.
Yeah.
Right, I think that's the wise thing to do also.
Now I'm learning a lot. I wish we had this conversation back when I was in this situation. But one thing that I did do was I aligned with that manager of the harasser to make sure that our in-office days were different from their in-office days.
Great.
So after that point in time, there shouldn't have been any contact. What if, it's a situation like mine where the intern absolutely don't want to get involved in a reporting process, says don't do this or I will leave, or goes to some extreme measures to make sure that they don't get involved in reliving this experience, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
what then can Amanda do to make sure that at least for future interns or anyone else who comes into the company, they don't become a target or become a victim again?
Yeah, that's a tough one because Amanda, in her role, she's playing two roles here, right? One as a employee, as a manager. So that's a part of her that needs to do things correctly, and that's the other part that is as looking after well-being of you, let's say of the person who's the victim, right? Then there's that difficulty there. Sometimes it's a judgment call, and of course, if today the person doesn't want to pursue for whatever reason, really doesn't want to pursue, very often the manager would be inclined to just let things go. Yeah. But of course, I would say that if that's the situation, then the manager should at least continue to check in. Check in meaning that to have that open channel with the person, because the person might change their mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes after they go back, they talk to their friends, they speak to their family members about it. They feel like, I think I should do something about it. So the manager should, always maintain the open communication. Maybe thank the person for even trusting you to share this because it has been uncomfortable. But now that there's an open communication there, that channel is always open if you choose to change your mind.
Is there usually a timeline or a time frame in which you can report this thing? What if the intern, later on becomes a full-time employee, and then a year later they're like, you know what, I'm going to nip this in the bud a little bit late, but can I report this now?
I don't know whether we are going to the legalities of things, right? But I don't know, if things pass after a long time, people might wonder, like, why are you reporting this after so long?
Right.
So I do think that if someone wants to report, do it as quickly as possible.
Amanda, you're in a tough situation, and we sympathize with you and your intern. Hopefully this discussion that we just had helps you to understand better where your options lie and how you can support your intern moving forward. Like Gerald said, this is not something that we should be tolerating in the workplace. If any of you who are listening or watching have a workplace dilemma, write to us. We're at cnapodcast@mediacorp.com.sg.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Nat. Small actions can shape a safer workplace for everyone.